If everybody could please find a seat, we'll be getting started in a few moments. Good evening. I'm going to call this special town meeting of the town of Charlton to order. We'll open with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm Peter Cooper Jr., the town moderator. Please bear with me as I go over a few things before we get started. First of all, in the case of an emergency, keep in mind there are exits both in front and the back of the auditorium. We have a lot of interesting issues on our agenda for today. I want everybody to remember that we all enter here as neighbors and friends, and when we leave here, we're still going to be neighbors, so let's try and still remain friends as well. When you are recognized to speak, please state your name and address so that we all know who you are. Your comments should be specifically about the issue that is before the voters, and not addressing your comments to any particular person or group other than the moderator. You may attack other people's arguments, but you cannot attack other people. Your comments should be about new information or new arguments, and not just rehashing what the speakers before you have already said. In order to respect everybody's time, I'm asking that you please make your points in under 3 minutes, because by that point, people are probably starting to tune you out anyway. It's in your best interest. That being said, I do encourage people, come up and ask questions. If you're unclear on something, if you're thinking of asking a question, chances are other people are as well. Just come on up and come up to one of these microphones and identify yourself and ask your questions so that we can all understand what's going on. We ask that you please submit any motions or amendments in writing. If you're not quite sure exactly how to word what you're trying to accomplish, please ask and we can help you phrase it to do what you want. So we don't have to try to rework your words later. Move on to reading the warrant. To either of the constables of the town of Charlton in the county of Worcester, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify the inhabitants of the town of Charlton qualified to vote in elections to meet in the Charlton Middle School, Oxford Road in said Charlton, on Tuesday, October 20th, 2015, at 7 o'clock in the evening. Here we are. For the purpose of taking action on the following articles, and at the end, you're directed to serve this warrant by posting a tested copy of one of each of the post offices, one in Dexter Memorial Hall, and one in the Charlton Municipal Offices, George C. McKinstry III building in said town, 14 days at least before the time and place of holding meeting. Hereof fail not, and make due returns of the warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk at the time and place of holding meeting, given under our hands this 29th day of September in the year of our Lord 2015, and it was posted as directed. Article 1, appropriation of funds for unpaid bills of a prior fiscal year. To see if the town will vote to raise by taxation, transfer, or borrow and appropriate a sum or sums to accounts to be specified at the town meeting for payment of one or more prior fiscal year's bills not paid due to an insufficiency of appropriation or for other reasons, or take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Swenson.
I move that the following prior year bills not previously paid due to insufficiency or appropriation or late billing be paid from the following FY16 account as printed below.
Second.
We have a motion and second as printed. Mr. Swenson, is that on?
It is.
Okay, thank you. What is the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
The Finance Committee supports this article.
And the Board of Selectmen?
The Board of Selectmen supports the article.
We have a motion and a second as printed. Is there any discussion on Article 1? Yes, sir.
Yes, David Karen, 36 Main Street. This is bills for last year that we need to just clean up. Is that what's happening here?
Somebody like to address that?
I'm curious if in the future it might be more beneficial to the town to have a tree company or say a road company provide their own flag person so that we don't need to spend town dollars on police detail. Has that option been looked into for future purposes? I don't know if you guys paid for it this time, but that would be something that would be financially sound, I would think. Anybody?
Would someone like to address that? Mr. McGrath? if you could get a microphone, please.
I believe this is, I don't know about the specific detail, but I know there are certain areas in the town that they cannot just use a flag person to control the traffic, and that the tree warden probably had one of those areas that we had to have a police officer there to do the detail.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion on Article 1? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as printed on Article 1, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no? Motion on Article 1 passes unanimously. Article 2, intra-departmental transfers and/or appropriations for FY 2016 budget. To see if the town will vote to raise by taxation, borrow, or transfer, and appropriate from available funds, including so-called free cash and/or funds previously appropriated to other uses, a sum or sums of money to accounts and for purposes to be specified at the special town meeting, or take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Zafirovich.
I move the following sum to be raised by taxation or transferred, whichever is indicated below, and appropriated to the following accounts for any purpose for which funds may be expended from the latter accounts, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen or Chief Procurement Officer to enter into such contracts, including lease, and to take such other actions as may be necessary or advisable to effectuate the purposes of the foregoing vote, each item being considered a separate appropriation as printed below.
We have a motion and second on Article 2 as printed. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Stephen Sage, 41 Lincoln Point Road. I noticed down here there's a $15,000 item for a town accountant transition. Could somebody explain that for a moment?
Somebody like to address that? Mr. Swenson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Unfortunately, we were informed recently by our town accountant that she's going to be retiring, and we're going to bring, the goal of this is to bring someone in an interim basis to learn some of the process and make the transition smooth.
Thank you. I did know that, but I also wanted to make sure everybody in this room knew that, and that we are losing an incredibly valuable individual in this town's administration. I had the fortunate experience of managing a $7 million renovation of the library and submitted warrants to Joan for close to 18 months, and it was a complete pleasure working with her. And I think this community will greatly miss her.
And I think everyone in this board would absolutely agree with you, Mr. Sage. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Norman Dugas, 9 East Spartan Road. I have a question. This environmental legal assistance, $250,000. What's that all about?
Ms. Graver?
Yes, sir.
Can you talk right into that, because I don't think it's up very loud.
We just completed a settlement, the Board of Selectmen, with Millennium Power Plant. There was a section in the power plant, in the agreement, in the pilot program, that allowed for, if the municipality aggregated their electricity, that we would receive wholesale electricity. When the town meeting voted to actually agree to aggregate, the Board of Selectmen provided notice, and we started that process. We provided notice to Millennium in negotiations. What we recognized is that they would not be able to fill that section, and we were able to negotiate a settlement thereof of $250,000. That money has been placed in an account reserved for appropriation. After discussion and debate on that funding, what we are asking town meeting to do, and our greatest need right now, is to put that into the environmental. As most of you know, we have been negotiating with Exxon. The Board of Selectmen and the Water Sewer Commission has been working with DEP to kind of finally bring home an additional 6 miles of new infrastructure. We have done everything, the town has done everything that was required by Exxon by getting the IMA and providing potable water available for the infrastructure. We have also worked with Masonic Home to have them agree to hook up. So we are at the point now where we are in discussions. We need some legal assistance In those discussions, we are going to start mediation with Exxon, and that funding will be able to assist us in doing that. Whatever is not used, and certainly we will not use that if we don't need it, we'll go back to the general fund as free cash or to be reappropriated by this body.
Yes, sir.
Question about line item number 3, Town Hall 88 project. Is that what's going on in the front of the building right now? Because I thought we gave a bunch of money to that last May. Did we give $10,000 to that, and now we need more money? Is that what's happening here?
Ms. Graver.
No, sir. As you'll see, Town Hall ADA project interest. This was interest to pay the debt. You have already authorized the spending of the monies for that. We did not know what the interest rate was going to be, the amount exactly at town meeting. We found out after town meeting. So what this is appropriating that money. So we've already borrowed from the project and for the project as you've authorized, and we have begun the project.
Okay. All these listings at the bottom of this MCI Metro Access deal, can somebody explain what that's all about?
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to do that. The Board of Assessors, this is out of their overlay account. There is no new monies in these transfers. So they're transferring from 1 year's overlay to another year's overlay. The total amount will come up to an amount that has been negotiated, a settlement with the Board of Assessors. And just in explaining this, and I think Debbie Tribrini, our Director of Assessing, is here, I'd like to give her some kudos because it was supposed to be a certain amount, and she did some negotiating with them and brought it down, I think, at least $20,000 or so. So she did really well, and what this is to transfer all of these overlay accounts into one overlay account so that we'll be able to pay that settlement.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Article 2? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as printed on Article 2, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no. Motion on Article 2 passes unanimously. Article 3, capital items and related contracts. To see if the town will vote to raise by taxation, borrow, or transfer from available funds, including so-called free cash, and funds previously appropriated to other uses, and appropriate a sum or sums to purchase capital items and/or for service, repair, improvement, architectural, construction, renovation, improvement, and/or other contracts relating to town buildings, facilities, and other property, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen, Chief Procurement Officer, or other appropriate town official, board, commission, or committee to enter into such contracts or leases, and to take such other action as may be necessary or advisable to effectuate the purposes of such votes, or take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator.
Mrs. Cooper.
I move that the town vote to appropriate the following amounts to the following departments' respective amounts for the FY 2016 budget to be expended for the following purposes, each item being considered a separate appropriation, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen or Chief Procurement Officer to enter into such contracts, including leases, and to take such other action as may be necessary or advisable to effectuate the purposes of the foregoing vote, as printed with the exception of animal control, which will be changed to $1,424, and the total changing to $460,444.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. As printed in Article 3, with the exception that the animal control well repair line item is being changed from $2,800 to $1,424, and that changes the total to be $460,444. Ms. Graver?
By way of explanation for the change, we had issues with the well at the animal control building, and we had planned on, we believed that the only solution at that time was to frack and make the well deeper. While we were waiting for town meeting, the well went dry, and we had a contractor come in and they replaced the pump, and it appears that that may be sufficient. So I'd like to thank the chief for his good work on that and reducing that amount.
Thank you. And we also get the recommendation of the Finance Committee on Article 3
The Finance Committee supports passage of the article.
and of the Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen supports the article.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on Article 3? Mr. Dugas.
Yes, I got one question. The fire department's replacing one car for $52,000, and the police department's replacing two for $76,000. I mean, you know, it's $38,000 per vehicle, and one's costing $52,000. What's the difference between them? We're talking about a car, cruiser.
Chief,
Chief Cloutier,
you talk right into the microphone, please.
Sure. The vehicle that we're purchasing, the change for between the police vehicle and the fire vehicle, the fire replacement for car one is a different kind of it's not a car, it's actually a four-wheel drive unit. It also is requiring a set of radios in there, also a command console and lighting package. So all those things are put into it, that's what drives up the price on that.
No, my question was, it says a car. Now, are you replacing with a four-wheel drive truck?
Yes. Yeah, it's in the fire jargon, I hate to say, it's it's known as car one, but it is an SUV.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on Article 3? Yes, sir.
The total balance, $460,000 and change. What percentage of free cash is that?
Somebody like to address that? Ms. Walker?
It's a little less than half.
Is there any further discussion on Article 3? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 3 as presented, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no? The motion on Article 3 passes by more than 2/3 vote. Article 4, transfer to or from stabilization funds. To see if the town will vote to transfer and appropriate a sum or sums to or from the stabilization fund account, or take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes, sir.
I move that the town vote to transfer and appropriate the following sum to and from the following account and fund. To the following account of stabilization fund, the amount of $504,995, sources from free cash, and the purpose is to go into reserves.
Second.
We have a motion and second as presented. What is the recommendation of the Finance Committee
The Finance Committee supports this motion.
and of the Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen supports the article.
Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Second Stage, Lincoln Point Road. Since we did not use all the free cash for the previous article, Article 3, there's like $1,000 left, or thereabouts, or $400 or $600 left. Shouldn't that number from free cash be added up, the amount that was left over from the previous warrant? Because we have this money now out there in La La Land.
Ms. Graver?
Yes, sir. Yes, you're correct that there are some unallocated, unappropriated funding, which is about $1,300. The Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee had a discussion on whether or not to add that to stabilization at this time, and they decided to let that go, stay unappropriated, so that when we come back in May, if there's some budgets that need some assistance, that there will be $1,300 to be able to use that if they don't have the money within their budget to transfer.
Okay, thank you. I was also, when I first saw this, kind of flabbergasted that there was close to $1 million of free cash, and my understanding was that free cash is leftover money that hasn't been used by departments. And so I did some inquiry, and I discovered that there's some real reasons why we have such a huge amount of free cash this year versus previous years. One of those is the excise tax on our cars was dramatically more than previous years, because I guess a whole lot of us have bought new cars and are now paying a higher excise tax. There's also something called contracts and obligations, where the town has appropriated money in case somebody gets hired and goes on to health care provided by the town, or retires and there's money needed to fulfill retirement obligations. That money apparently did not get used this past year, and so about $105 or so thousand came back to the town. There was also some insurance adjustments that came in much lower than what was originally appropriated, and so it came up to be quite a huge amount, almost $800-some thousand of these monies, that unexpected monies coming into excise taxes, money that wasn't used last year. A very small amount of money came back from departments. Departments over the years have been trimmed. They have been worried about even buying paper clips and postage and things like that. So don't think this is just non-used money from departments and they just over-budgeted themselves. It's completely different than that. I wanted to make sure people understood where free cash money comes from.
Is there any further discussion on Article 4? Seeing none, this requires a 2/3 vote due to the movement into stabilization. All those in favor of the motion as presented on Article 4, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no. Motion on Article 4 passes unanimously. Article 5, reauthorization of capital debt. To see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds the following sums to purchase capital items, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen or Chief Procurement Officer to enter into such contracts, and to take other such action as may be necessary to effectuate the purpose of such votes, as printed in your booklet, or take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Swenson?
I move that Article 5 be accepted as printed.
Second.
We have a motion and second to accept Article 5 as printed. What is the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
The Finance Committee supports passage of this article.
And of the Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen supports this article.
Is there any discussion on Article 5? Yes, sir.
I'm gonna be here all night. I'm just curious what archival storage is, because that seems like an awful lot of money for file boxes and floppy disks.
Mr. Meskis, you want that one?
Mr. Meskis?
Curtis Meskis, H-Foot Road, also the chairman of the Municipal Building Committee. This is a project to provide space for the historical files and files that the town is required by statute to keep forever. We have no appropriate climate control storage area in the building to do it with, and it's amazing what the state government requires us to keep forever. So we're trying to provide, and we've been pushing this can down the road for years, we're trying to provide an appropriate space to have this be fire resistant and climate controlled, so we don't have mold issues and hang on to these documents that are required to be kept forever.
Is this space within the town hall? I'm curious, in the basement or?
We are currently storing stuff in the basement, and it is not suitably fireproof, because basically, even though you look at the building as a brick building, it is a wood building on the interior. So a conceptual design is to build a space in the rear alcove of the building that would be dispatched and only connected by a corridor, and would afford us that fire resistance that the state wishes us to have.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Article 5? Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, Robert Mansky, Sunset Drive. Question on, or an explanation of the funding sources of both these items. This is where the money's coming from?
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In both cases, these are, now the Prindle Pond case, where the town had voted money for the repair of the Prindle Pond Dam, which was done through betterments to the abutters and property owners there. That project came in at about 50% of the projected, what we thought it was going to cost. And Ms. Craig, do you want to add to that?
And as far as the landfill goes, so what I'm understanding is these were line items that these dollars were going to be
These dollars
extended
for the landfill capping was dollars, money that was put aside for the landfill capping, which was completed, and this is money that's
coming back.
coming back from that project.
Okay, so,
The project we closed out.
all right, so none of this, forgive me, my glasses are not with me, but it's $239,000. So that's not coming out of the general fund. That's money that's coming out of an account that was overfunded because the budget came in under.
That's
and
correct.
there was some, okay, very good. And as far as the archives, has any consideration been given to outsourcing that to private company? Just say, go store it and pay a monthly or annual or quarterly fee?
I would actually refer that back to Mr. Meskis if you could.
Mr. Meskis.
There are some facilities available, however, in good customer service, it's difficult to retrieve those files quickly when people are doing research. So we find that it seems to be better to store them nearby.
Just for better access. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sage.
Just to recap, those two amounts could have been brought back into free cash because they weren't expended, and then put into here as a free cash item. But for clarity of where the money is coming from, I think it's nice that we're told that extra money from the landfill project, extra money from the Cripple Pond Dam project is what's funding this new project. I might be wrong there, but it seems that excess money goes into free cash. But I like the idea of understanding where money is coming from, and I would actually like to see in the future that when we know we have free cash, where those monies are coming from in the future.
Ms. Walker.
Both of these projects were borrowed funds, and they both came in under what we borrowed. And the statutes require that we can only do certain things with surplus borrowing. One of them is to transfer the funds to a project that we could borrow for the same amount of time. And that's what we're planning to do. We can't just go back and get free cash.
Okay, well, that's good to know. You learned something? Troublemakers here.
Commissioner McGrath from Sawmill Circle.
Yes, sir.
I just did the math. The two sums don't add up to the total. Are they rounded up, or is those are rounded numbers? I'm sorry?
Most likely they're rounded, it's my Excel spreadsheet.
So it's a rounded number, and that's just the way it came out on Excel? Because it's off by over $100.
Ms. Walker.
I did the math right,
Can I address
239,382.
At the last minute, we had to reduce the amount from the Prindle Pond by like $108, and I think we just did not change the total. The two individual amounts are correct.
The individual ones, yeah.
Yes.
All right.
And for clarity, should we try and have a motion that involves an updated total? What's the correct total? Okay, so then, barring objection, I'm going to change the motion we're voting on to be as printed with the exception that the total is $239,382. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Kathy Benjamin, 44 Old Worcester Road. I'd like to know how projects like this, when we have to reallocate borrowed money, get chosen.
Somebody like to address that?
The original project was chosen?
Why was money that was over budgeted on other projects and borrowed allocated to this project? What projects were looked at, and how was this one chosen as being a priority?
Through the chair.
Mr. McGrath?
I'll just moderate. Mr. Moderator, I'm sorry, I'm used to being at the selection. as a member of the building, as the municipal building committee, we had a problem in town hall during the winter where we had a split pipe up in the attic. And it basically ruined a lot of stuff in the town hall, but mostly in the clerk's office. The town clerk, in the space that she was allocated for storage of records and everything else, had a lot of damage, and a lot of documents were ruined. The municipal building committee chose this project because of the fact that when we moved the town hall from what is now the library, the town clerk's office over there had a safe in which all these documents were kept in. By direction of the Secretary of State, that is the way the documents are supposed to be maintained. So since we moved the town hall over from the library over to the existing town hall, we've never met with the proper way of caring for documents by as we are directed to care for them by the Secretary of State. Add on to that the fact that 4 rooms downstairs in the basement of the town hall also had documents in them. Some of them, I'm not on the historical society, a member of the historical society, but I know that a couple of members of the historical society spent a ton of time copying stuff down there because it's getting wrecked. Because we don't have proper archival storage for it. And that's why the municipal building committee put this forth through the town administrator, to the board of selectmen, and to the finance committee.
So if we had a safe in the former town hall, which is now the library, and that was proper storage, where is that safe now, and why wouldn't we use it?
First of all, the safe was put in there when the old town hall was built. It was not maintaining all the records we had then. The town has grown, as I'm sure everybody here knows. What they used to do with a lot of historical records was store them in the attic of the now municipal building. The town has never cared for their records correctly. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do right now.
So what I also would like to know is, I understand from the water department that we also have a big problem with getting water in the lines on Route 20, which also would feed into our fire hydrants. Would a backflow preventer be put in line, allow for fire protection on that side of Route 20? I understand that the reason is there's a fear of water contamination because there isn't a loop. That is why I am suggesting the idea that maybe we should be looking into a backflow preventer.
Regarding the question on the backflow preventer, I would defer to the Water Sewer Commission. But what I will also just add is that we have a capital plan that we've been going through, and we try to fund things currently in order. The archival storage is something that has been, as Mr. Meskis had said, has been kind of kicked down the road because it's such a large ticket item, and it's one that we've hoped that wouldn't come to kind of bite us with our records. So there was only a few things that would actually qualify, as the town accountant said, to borrow something that we legally could borrow over 20 years. This was one of just the few that was the most important this time. The question that you're asking about the backflow, I think that that's an interesting question, and I think that that might be something the Water Sewer Commission can look at on their retained earnings and capital plan.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be a study on that, because that certainly is an issue. We don't want to contaminate water, but I think we also want to make sure that there's protection at that end of town. I know in the last 2 weeks that a lot of hydrants have been finally covered to indicate that they are offline, something that should have been done a long time ago. And I think that from my discussions with people on Route 20 and the businesses that are out there, they were absolutely shocked to find out that those hydrants were dry. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the monies for the Prindle Pond project, if those were raised via betterment supplied to the residents surrounding Prindle Pond and those monies are no longer needed, shouldn't they be refunded to those residents rather than reallocated to something else?
Ms. Graver?
The betterments were only for the project cost. So it's two separate things, what they were bettered for and what the project cost was and what town meeting appropriated, and then we had an estimate for those costs. So the cost came in lower. The residents were bettered only the cost of construction, and these are the additional funds that came in because the project came in under budget.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Grass on this again. Is this going to be the final amount that was needed for the archival storage, or are we going to revisit more monies in next town meeting?
I see Mr. Meskin's getting up, but my guess is from our discussions at the building committee that this will not be enough. As you know, the town of Charlton has had a history of setting money aside for projects as we can. This would get us a design and what we're going to do. Hopefully get, my hope is that it would be around 70% for the construction, and we would come back to town meeting for the final of the plans.
Mr. Meskis?
So what's the final estimate for the project for archival storage?
At this time, we do not have one because the first step that we'll need to do is to do a study on what we can do and a design. The monies are being moved over in anticipation because, as been explained, these are two projects that have come in under budget. So these are two projects of money that we could use for this purpose. At this point, and usually we don't like to come to town meeting without knowing exactly what those costs are. What this cost will do is get us answered what we would be building out there, and then we would come back to whatever the balance is.
Yep.
Is there any further discussion on Article 5? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion on Article 5 as presented, again with the total being $239,382, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no? No. Motion on Article 5 passes by more than a 2/3 vote. Article 6, donation of land. To see if the town will vote to accept a parcel of land shown on Town of Charlton Tax Map 20A-C-26, which is approximately 5,000 square feet, or take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Zafirovich.
I move that Article 6 be passed over for more information.
Second.
We have a motion and second to take no action on Article 6. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Graver?
By way of explanation, this is a property that the owner was interested in giving to the town. We were interested in accepting it to save the cost of tax title. We have now been informed that an abutter may have an interest in the land. So what we'd like to do is to pass over for more information, and hopefully the two residents will be able to work something out. If not, we will bring it back to the next meeting.
Is there any further discussion on Article 6? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing over Article 6 and taking no action at this time, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no? The motion to take no action on Article 6 passes unanimously. Article 7, authorize selectmen for and on behalf of the town to repair town-owned South Charlton Reservoir Dam, to assess betterments, etc., and to appropriate funds for same, to see if the town will vote pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2010, the Act, and any other applicable legal authority, A, to authorize the Board of Selectmen, or on behalf of the town, subject to appropriation and on such terms as it deems to be in the town's best interest, to pay costs of an initial survey and design work associated with making repairs to and/or reconstructing the South Charlton Reservoir Dam, which is owned by the town as the board deems necessary or advisable, to acquire by gift, purchase, eminent domain, or otherwise, any interest, if any, needed in real property appertaining thereto for those purposes. I'm going to skip over reading all the other sections here. And I, to authorize said board to enter into contracts and other agreements and take other such actions as may be necessary or advisable to effectuate the aforementioned purposes or take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator,
Mrs. Cooper.
I move that the sum of $70,000 is hereby appropriated to pay costs of an initial survey work associated with making repairs to and/or reconstructing the South Charlton Reservoir Dam, including the payment of all testing, studies, engineering, and legal costs associated therewith, and any other costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the selectmen are authorized to accept and expend any grants or donations, and the treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow $70,000 under and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2010, Chapter 20, and/or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue general obligation bonds or notes for the town therefore. That upon recommendation of the Board of Selectmen, the town establish the South Charlton Reservoir Dam Enterprise Fund, and that all receipts, revenues, and funds from any source, including the aforementioned funds and all sums from betterments and interest received in connection with the dam and appurtenant real estate, if any, be deposited into such fund and used for expenses and capital expenditures for the dam. Further, that selectmen are authorized to assess betterments to pay the cost of all or any portion of this project upon properties benefiting from the acquisition, ownership, repair, maintenance, improvement of, or other work on the South Charlton Reservoir Dam, in such amounts as the selectmen shall determine to be in the best interests of the town, and that the article in all other respects be accepted as printed.
We have a motion and second on Article 7 as printed. What is the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
The Finance Committee approves this motion.
And of the Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen supports the article.
Is there any discussion on Article 7? Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, Phil Sear, 224 Partridge Hill Road. Just wanted to make a couple comments relative to this. I'm speaking on behalf of the South Charlton Reservoir Association. The dam, the reservoir was built in the 1850s, and as any structure like that has deteriorated over time, it is in need of some repairs. The extent of those repairs is as yet unknown. We have a general idea, but the purpose of this study is to take the first step in identifying what repairs are required and developing some initial estimates for those repairs. I just wanted to make it clear, because there's a lot of legal jargon in here, as is required by law, that this project will proceed similarly to the project on Prindle Pond. All of the design, engineering, and construction costs will be gathered, and a betterment based upon those costs will be assessed to the property owners that abut South Charlton Reservoir or have deeded access to it. And I just want to make sure that that's very clear, and also to thank Mrs. Craver and Todd Gerard of the Conservation Commission for their help to date, and look forward to working with them in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on Article 7? Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, Robert Lemansky, Sunset Drive. I've got multiple questions. I guess probably start with an easy one. Is how is a determination going to be made as far as properties that benefit? Is this a back lots going to be also charged to betterment as well as waterfront lots? Because back lots, if they have access to water, then they will enjoy the use of that water and the fact that there is a dam. So how is that going to be done?
As it stands right now, I believe the betterments would be to, as Mr. Sears said, to abutters to the lake and those with deeded access.
So deeded access lot would be treated the same as a waterfront lot, or is there a percentage differential?
I believe with Prindle, there was a differential, that the betterment was higher for waterfront than it was for deeded access. I was just informed that those with deeded access back lots paid 50% of the betterment that waterfront lots paid.
Okay, okay. And so in those, I guess this should be split hairs, but those who actually have deeded rights in their deed, or those who have deeded rights because they were part of a subdivision, and that subdivision identified an access lot to where the subdivision lots would have access to that lot which goes to the lake.
As was with Prindle Pond, that would be based on the assessors,
right?
The assessor's determination, and so that's a question we've got to serve by the assessors.
As a resident of Charlton and also as a lakefront property owner of Glen Echo, as I was talking to someone earlier today, it looks like Glen Echo is going to be next fall if in fact we do vote this means of funding, which I know from years ago when it was always thought of as how would you pay for something. One of the last resorts was to go with the either water district or betterment process, which are pretty much they wanted the same. You create the water district, and members of the water district would pay. Before this is implemented, or did anyone think of other ways of funding this before we hit this panic button? And what came out of that, such as state funds? And I think there was a town in Sutton just recently who ended up getting funds through the state. I know they had to have, and I tell you, we have one on Glen Echo. We have public access on Glen Echo, but it's by rooftop boat only, very specific. So we qualify for state access. That's how years ago our then state representative, Mr. Peters, was able to get funds, I think almost in the $1 million range, to repair Glen Echo Dam. And also happened at the same time, there was a property owner who donated some property, and the state identified that as state property, state access. And I don't think anyone with a rooftop boat has ever used that access in the last, I would say, good 15 years. But I don't know about South Charlton, whether they have one, whether they want one, but I know that the funding for this project, I believe in Sutton, somewhere around there, that's exactly what would happen, and how they were able to do it.
Yes, sir. Just a couple of clarifications. We're not, at this point, really hitting the panic button. We do have, we feel, a significant amount of time in which to address this. We're trying to get out and stay ahead of it. The dam is in good condition as it currently stands, but there are some signs that it is deteriorating. There's some evidence that if we don't fix these problems in the near future, and by that I mean in the next several years, that they could get to the point where they could be very costly. So we're trying to approach this at a time when we can minimize those costs. This first phase is strictly to determine what the repairs will be. While this first phase is happening and through design, we have identified several potential sources of funding. We do have some people on the Lake Association that have volunteered to research those, and we hope that in conjunction with the town, we could apply for some grant money or some other types of funding.
And thank you. You just answered part of a core question that I just had. It was exactly what is the condition of the dam. I believe the state usually puts out a report. They classify dams A, B, C, D, and E or something along those lines. So you're saying South Charlton Ridge Dam, which has been there since the 1800s, is in fairly good condition.
The last state dam inspection was done approximately 4 years ago. At that time, the dam was listed in good condition. There are 5 levels. Good is kind of the middle. Am I right on that, Ziggy? Satisfactory. And however, that inspection was done with the water level up, and we, through the Lake Association, contracted with an engineer last fall when the lake level was down through our normal drawdown cycle, because we had seen some areas that would not have been identified with the lake level up. This engineer agreed that those were problematic and results in the next inspection giving us a rating of 4, which again does not trigger any immediate action by the Office of Dam Safety, but clearly there's some degradation, and we want to fix these before we get to the point where we are, as you stated, hitting the peak.
Okay. Thank you very much for that answer. And you know, for myself, as far as the comfort level, I think the putting this, in fact, I'm almost going to call it a stigma on the property owners, because at this time only is probably when you're going to need I believe it's a 2/3 vote.
Yes, for borrowing requires a 2/3 vote.
All right, and let me see if this is going to come out correctly. As far as funding goes, and as far as lake people, as ourselves are, those who live here in the lake, you know, we're always spoke of as those people, or the lake people. And one thing that is crystal clear is that property owners, and I'm only talking land, I'm not talking homes, property owners that pay taxes here in the town of Charlton pay at least 60 to 70% more for their lot than a lot that's on a side street. So in other words, if there was a house lot on Partridge Hill Road that didn't have access to the lake, and this can be checked with the assessors department. The range is $80,000. That's the average house lot here in Charlton that's assessed for. I know on Glen Echo, because I'm one of 3 members of the committee who have just done the work on all waterfront lots on South Charlton, Glen Echo Lake. And in comparison to house lots in Glen Echo Lake versus house lots anywhere where we're in town, the total number of house lots, the additional taxes that's paid by the lake owners works out to be $124,000 to $500. And those additional monies are only because of our assessor. Our assessor classifies waterfront property that has GW. It's called good water. You go right to the assessor's.
Sir, is this relevant to this?
Yes, it is relevant. And the reason why it's relevant is because we shouldn't be paying a betterment. We shouldn't be assessed a betterment. Is that $125,000 that I know that Glen Echo represents probably 2/3 the size of South Charlton Res. So South Charlton Res is already paying $160,000 to $170,000. Those homeowners in excess because of the ability to use that lake. And no one minds paying that because we can use the lake. But if in fact the dam was in such disrepair and the water had to be let down, like over at Stiles Lake, you go to Stiles now, there's no water in the lake. It's been like that for 3 years because there's an issue with the dam and they haven't got the money to fix the dam. I know for me, I would be at the assessor's office knocking on the door and saying, my good water is gone, you need to move me down from $160,000 for my land down to $80,000 like everybody else in town. So my point is the town of Charlton has a stake in the quality of the dam and the quality of the water. Because if the dam goes and the water goes, then that extra money that all these homeowners are paying, these homeowners are going to say is, I'm not paying it anymore. I want an abatement because you're charging me for good water that's not there anymore. So the point I'm making is we've been paying this money, all right, for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden is where there is a need for some funds to repair things, all of, our partner, okay, because they're the ones who receive this extra money, is saying it's all on you now. Okay? There's nothing on them. And I don't mean it as big people, okay? So, well, if you listen and you would understand the statement value here. So the point being is...
Sir, he has the floor right now.
Please conclude your remarks. There's available dollars that come into the town for the fact of having the quality of good water and the quality of the dam. And the thing is, I really think that when this first came out a few months ago, that there was a bulletin that both Lanico and South Charlton Res needed to start thinking about the betterment process. I'm saying to myself, this seems crazy. It seems crazy for the simple fact is, what have we been paying all this money in year after year?
You made your point, sir.
No one's paying any attention. It's a good question, and maybe I can have an answer for it.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, sir.
Just to address the whole thing with betterments, when we pay higher taxes, I'm also a resident of South Charlton Reservoir. We pay a higher tax because our property is worth more because it's on the lake, and the assessors use the fact that we're on the lake to assess us more money because our property is just worth more money. So we just pay based on the value of our homes as it is. So more valuable homes should pay betterments because they pay higher taxes.
Well, and that's through.
Well, I would like to make sure this is all focused on the motion that's before us right now.
Right, that's exactly the point. The point is if the dam is broken and the dam goes away, then those higher, you can't use the lake anymore, there's no more higher taxes. So you see how you're part of the, when I say you, see how the town of Charlton is part of this? They're an investor. They're a partner in on this. And they've been happy to take our money for having good water. And just like South Charlton Res, the Glen Echo Association, we spend money for weed control. We try to do the best as we can. We have funds to do projects like this. And the town of Charlton used to give, you may remember this, 3-4 years ago, everyone would get, the two lakes would get $2,000 a year for weed control. Well, that stopped. You know, so we get nothing now. But all I do know is I know for a fact that we overpaid as far as Glen Echo goes to the tune of $125,000. I'm sure South Charlton Res is about 160 or 170.
I think you made your point, sir.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion with new information on this article? Yes, sir.
2 quick questions. Number one, where did the figure of $70,000 come from? Was that bidded out? Did we get estimates with some people or something like that?
Yes, sir.
It has not been bid out yet. That's an estimate based upon an engineer that does these phase 2 studies on a regular basis and is familiar with our deal.
Okay. And second question, if you are through this motion authorizing borrowing $70,000, which we'll then have to pay back to somebody with interest, wouldn't it be more fiscally prudent to use some of that money we just socked away into stabilization for something like this and then not have to pay interest?
Somebody like to address that?
If we got the money, might pay interest. No, I don't like to have credit cards. Why don't you pay for it?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd answer that by saying the stabilization account is for the benefit of all Charlton residents. It's recommended by the state and by our lending institutions that we maintain 10% of our annual budget in stabilization. At this point, with all this money going into stabilization, we'll be at about 5%. So to take a big chunk out of that, the stabilization is our rainy day account. To take a big chunk out of that for a project that's going to benefit only a certain number of residents, we don't feel is the best fit being as fiscally responsible as we could be. Again, there will be interest on this, but that interest will be borne by those who get the benefits of the dam repair.
Thank you very much.
Is there further discussion on Article 7? Seeing none, again, this requires a 2/3 vote due to involving borrowing. All those in favor of the motion as printed on Article 7, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no. No. Motion passes by more than a 2/3 vote. Article 8, Municipal Lien Authority for Outstanding Water Bills. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to file with the General Court a petition for special legislation in the form set forth below to allow the town of Charlton to exercise broad authority over collections of outstanding water charges due under the intermunicipal agreement with the town of Southbridge, provided, however, that the General Court shall be authorized to make clerical or editorial changes of form only to the bill, unless the Board of Selectmen approves amendments to the bill before enactment by the General Court, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to approve amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition, an act relative to designation of certain charges and fees in the town of Charlton as listed, or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. McGrath.
I move that Article 8 be accepted as printed.
Second.
We have a motion to accept Article 8 as printed. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on Article 8, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no. Motion on Article 8 passes unanimously. Article 9, local gas tax. To see if the town will vote, 1, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the House of Representatives and the Senate and General Court assembled to enact legislation which would authorize the town of Charlton, notwithstanding any other general or special law to the contrary, to adopt by majority vote at the next regular municipal or state election a local tax in an amount approved by town meeting per gallon of gasoline and diesel fuel sold to the public, such receipts to be reserved for the repair and maintenance of the town's roads and bridges, and 2, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to take such action as it deems necessary or appropriate for the purpose of effectuating the foregoing, or to take any action relative thereto or thereon.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Swenson.
I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to file with the General Court a petition for special legislation in the form set forth below to allow the town of Charlton, if approved by qualified voters at the next regular municipal election, to impose a local tax of 3 cents per gallon of gasoline and diesel fuel sold to the public, provided, however, that the General Court shall be authorized to make clerical or editorial changes of form only to the bill, unless the Board of Selectmen approves amendments to the bill before enactment by the General Court, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to approve amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition, and that Article 9 in all other respects be accepted as printed.
Yes, just a moment.
If I could, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
As the booklet printed, it says the regular municipal or state election. I did not read state election because the plan is to bring this forth at the Springtown meeting.
Okay, we have a motion, Article 9. It is as printed in your booklet. I know it goes on for a couple pages there. But in the first paragraph of the motion, the words "or state" have been removed. So it's at the next regular municipal election in line 3 of the motion. Is there a second? And Ms. Craver, you had comments?
Yes,
Oh, okay, sure. Sure. What is the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
The Finance Committee supports passage of this article.
And of the Board of
The
Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen support this article.
And now Ms. Craver?
By way of explanation, the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee have been working hard to keep the government services level funded. The Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee have been working hard to keep government services level funded since the recession, and have even worked on an override explaining the need for additional funds. They asked other town departments to review areas where revenues may be had to supplement the general budget. As you know, education funded at $13 million in FY16 has risen 26%, or $2.7 million in just 5 years. Fixed costs continue to rise. Retirement increased 75%, or $387,000 in that same time frame, and the library increased 29%, or $80,000 in the same time frame. Selectmen have sought reductions in costs, for example, by bidding out and making plan changes to the health insurances. The town saved thousands of dollars, but in reality, other insurance costs have offset those savings, and the total insurance costs have been reduced to only 2%, or $32,000. Cuts in the budgets are not keeping up with the increases. With that said, the Board of Assessors presented the gas tax as a viable option to the Board of Selectmen to generate additional general funds. The town of Lee, who has a mass turnpike rest area in its town, successfully enacted special legislation to receive a 3 cents gas tax for gas sold in their town. Members of our Board of Selectmen had just been discussing the need for an override with the school district when this information came in, and saw the gas tax as a possible additional revenue source, eliminating the need for an override. We have copied the town of Lee's article in motion, which has passed the legislature and recommended that we do not, and recommend that we do not add additional language. State legislators have been generally against giving cities and towns the ability to tax services and goods. In the last couple of years, they did enact two landmark pieces of legislation, the meals tax and the hotel motel tax. As you know, Charlton has benefited from the acceptance of the meals tax, mostly due to the turnpike rest stops. Charlton receives $189,000. We received $189,000 in meals tax in FY15. Those funds provided much relief to our general and educational budgets. Just as we use ambulance receipts and wetlands fund as receipts reserved for funding the budget, this will become a new revenue source for the existing highway budget. It is important to note, this money is intended to be an additional revenue source for the present highway budget and not intended to be all new monies for the highway department. I do plan to recommend, if this passes, that we restore the highways reconstruct, repair, and paving line item. It used to be funded at $75,000 and is now $42,000. I commend the Board of Assessors in looking for new revenue sources to help the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee keep the much needed and appreciated government services you have come to rely on intact. If this is passed, the legislators pass the special act favorably. A question will go to the Charlton voters for approval on the next town election.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Sage.
This is the first time I've actually seen the motion. I was basing my concerns on the first paragraph, because it talks about the monies would be reserved for repair and maintenance of towns' roads. And as a person who lives on a private road, and I don't understand the concept, it's completely foreign to me from my life experiences, that there is even such a thing as a private road. If we're talking about towns' roads, it seems to exclude private roads. Private roads are already excluded from the chapter, what is it, 90? Which chapter do we get funds for roads in there? 90, thank you. We're already excluded from using that money to repair people's roads who live on private roads. So I want to know that, is this absolutely going to make sure that private roads can be utilized, or monies can be utilized to actually repair private roads, so that we're not just creating pothole repair over pothole repair over pothole repair? If you drive down my road that actually has 30 residents on it, we take a hit. Our cars get damaged. We have to do other repairs on our cars because the road, as much as the highway department makes a strong effort to patch things and to plow us out, which I appreciate, but we do have to petition the town to do that. I want to know that the highway department will be able to actually use monies to repair private roads in a similar way that they can actually repair public roads, even if it's just tar and chips.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
Mr. Moderator, if I may. Mr. Sage, we don't see the role of we don't see the scope of work of the highway department changing as a result of this. It specifically says town roads, not town-owned roads. Town-owned roads would exclude private roads. So they would be able to continue to offer the services they offer now to privately owned roads.
So you consider private roads towns' roads?
Excuse me? Yeah, we'll turn that over to town council now.
Mr. Cosgrove?
That's what I asked. I think it's arguable either way. I think the better argument doesn't say town-owned roads, and I think to say that town roads in Charlton are the roads that are located in Charlton. If someone went to the Supreme Judicial Court and asked that question, how would it answer? I don't know. But I'm not sure it makes a lot of difference in the sense that, as you have implicitly recognized, towns can only spend money on private roads, but they can spend it for certain reasons. They could spend it for temporary repairs. They can't spend it for upgrading and full construction. And the town already has a bylaw under chapter 40, section 6N, and the town already has a bylaw authorizing temporary repairs on town roads, and they can clear snow and ice. So if these funds may be used for that, then they be used within the reasons permitted by the general law.
It seems that the highway department is handicapped because they're spending a number of man hours or person hours driving down our road, patching and patching and patching all year long, when if we could actually expend money in a suitable fashion to do a much better repair job, and having this influx of money from the gas tax would certainly allow that to happen. And would also allow it to happen to all the other roads in town, plus the roads that Chapter 90 or whatever it is funds come into. It would improve the infrastructure of this town. And I want to make sure that we're not going to be limited to just patching potholes and then patching the potholes again and having rocks coming up, because we pay taxes. And I know life's not fair, you know, most of the people on my road also have frontage on a lake, so they're already paying that excess amount for having nice property, yet our road creates a situation where, in my opinion, our property taxes should be lower because it's an undesirable road to drive down. But it's not the case, it will never be the case, because life's not fair. But I think we need to use these funds in a fair way to support all people in town.
Through the moderator, since
Mr. Cosgrove?
asked to find it's certainly an equitable argument to be made, and that's what you're arguing, essentially. But in order to attain that objective, either the general laws would have to be amended, or you would have to specifically say this in this legislation. And I'm not aware offhand of any legislation in the Commonwealth where towns have been, where a town or a municipality has been authorized to spend public funds on private roads. And my guess is that the legislature would not welcome that suggestion, because they have laws restricting where funds may be used on private roads. They may be, but only for temporary repairs. I see the same type of repairs in Worcester on the public roads, so I understand your argument. And
I'm also
a real risk that this would not fly.
I'm also concerned that, although you mentioned it, that these funds would possibly lower the general operating expenses of the highway department. And I do not want to see that happen. If every department is next year asked to lower themselves another 10% because of income expectations, that's fine. But to look at this excess money or the excise tax money from the gas tax and say, well, we now have $300,000, so let's, you know, take the $42,000 that the highway now has out and then substitute it in with this money instead. And we'll use that $42,000 elsewhere. I don't like that idea of moving money around like that, and I want reassurances that that's not going to happen.
Ms. Greer?
Yes, sir. As it states in there, the selectmen would decide how to use the money. What that would allow is that when we come back to May, annual town meeting, they would be in your budget line item in the motion. There are funds coming from the ambulance funds and other funds. There would be another line in there that would be contributing to the general fund, but fund balance. It would not go over the highway. And the highway department would not be impacted or changed in any way at what they're being funded, except for the recommendation to increase that line item at this point.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to just make a comment that with the fight for the meals tax, a gentleman stood up here and said he was very happy with the idea of somebody else paying into this town, meaning all the people on the Mass Pike. And we have recouped a tremendous amount, much more than we ever predicted we were going to get from the meals tax. And it has certainly helped in funding the kind of quality of life that we want to have in this town. Clearly not as much as I would like to see. I will speak to that in the future and probably in the spring.
Mr. Zafirovich.
Mr. Moderator, that reminds me, a really good segue to my point. If you look at the notes at the end of Article 9, you actually see some estimates on how much this would raise for the town. It is estimated that there's about 12 million gallons sold in the Mass Pike and 2 million gallons in Charlton. This will result in about $420,000 in revenue each year, with Mass Pike mowers paying about 80% of that, 86% of that total number.
No, I'm not going to make the same point, Mrs. Evans. Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Josh Evans, 122 Glen Echo Shore Road. The first thing I want to say is I want to applaud whoever wrote this because they have literally covered every single base that most people have with a gas tax. All the issues seem to be covered. So I guess my big question right now is to anyone up there or anyone who might be in the audience who might have been on the assessors who helped come up with this decision. Was there any other options other than a gas tax? Because a gas tax is a tendency to be a little bit regressive. It punishes the middle and lower class. Pretty much anyone who, in my bracket, if you will, demographic bracket, we are, if you think about it, held at an unfair standard compared to pretty much everyone else. So is there any other taxes that were considered at all that anyone could speak to?
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Swenson?
We didn't, I don't think anyone ever sat down and said, well, what taxes can we look at? I mean, it was brought to our attention that the town of Lee did this, and they did it successfully, and they did it because of the fact that they have a rest area in their town. So the thought process was, we have two, and like the meals tax, a very small percentage, I believe Mr. Zafirovich pointed out 14% of the cost that would actually be borne by Charlton residents. The only two gas stations we have in town are on Route 20, so while many residents, myself included, buy gas there, we have many people passing through town that stop there as well. And I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that very few Charlton residents buy gas on the Turnpike. I know, speaking for myself, and I think it's fairly common, if I'm heading west on the Pike, I get on in Sturbridge. If I'm heading east on the Pike, I get on in Auburn. So I don't go by the Charlton rest stops either way. So we really felt that we understand that it's going to be a bit of a burden on townspeople, but if we use the 14%, if you spend $14, I'll give you 86. We think that's pretty good, a pretty good investment.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, sir.
Just to add one thing to that, the town is restricted on what it can and cannot tax, and there's not many opportunities out there. One of the only other real options would be to do an override to increase the property tax, and that's really what we've only considered.
Fair enough. I can respect that, and I mean, for the record, I think anyone who knows me probably knows I'm the furthest thing from an advocate for taxation of any sort. So, to finish that off, I guess I also wanted to bring up, since most Charlton residents tend to use the Route 20 gas station, was there any concerns when you were writing this up that residents might go a little bit further to Southbridge, where gas has been unusually low in comparison to pretty much any other town around it? I mean, normally that wouldn't be an issue, but we are literally right next to Southbridge.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, sir.
If I may. That certainly came up in our discussion, but again, we feel the benefits so far outweigh any negatives that if we take a chance of losing a little bit of that business there, the overall benefit for the town is still there. And if I can relate it back to the meals tax, we heard the same thing there. People will go to a different Dunkin' Donuts or a different sandwich shop or something, and having been around, having had that in place now for a couple of years and visiting some of the places in town, I haven't had any business owner or eatery owner come up to me and say that they've seen a negative impact on their business from the meals tax. So we assume that it will be similar with the gas tax.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Kathleen Walker, 9060 Baker Pond Road. I almost understand this. I am in support of it in general. I just have a couple of questions. One of them is there any chance that if we were to get this legislation passed, that the legislature would then reduce our Chapter 90 monies?
Ms. Griffin?
I can only say that they have not used that model when looking at the meals tax or hotel tax, and we're not anticipating it. The administration that we have now, the Baker-Polito administration, has been very favorable in trying to assist cities and towns to be able to find the revenues and to be a little more self-determined. So I think that would be a detriment to towns being able to self-decide. So I don't see the administration doing that this time.
Okay. And
Mr. McGrath?
Through the moderator, administrations, Kathleen, are usually very, very sensitive about singling out one town to do something like that too. So in this case, it would be two towns. It would be the town of Lee and the town of Charlton, and that would probably not happen. And the fear there is that at some point in time, there would be retribution from somebody that they got a chance.
Thank you, John. The other question I have is just so that I can understand this. If we were to pass this legislation and we're able to get an extra, say, $300,000 a year, that money would or would not go into the highway fund?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. What we anticipate doing is using that funding for the highway budget and taking current general budget funds that normally would go to the highway department and directing those to other areas such as education and public safety and those types of things.
So if the money is, the reason you pass a gas tax is to specifically for bridges and roads in town, and in fact, that's not going to happen, it might be for education or something like that, isn't that somewhat deceptive?
No, I don't think it's somewhat deceptive because we will use the money for that process. What it will allow us to do is take other funds that would normally be used for that process and redirect them. So I don't think we're going to...
You're saying you're going to increase the highway funds, but then you're going to decrease the highway funds, so the highway funds are going to remain the same. Is that right?
The highway funds, we don't see it having a positive or negative impact on the highway funding. If it tends to go up, naturally it would still go up. If it's down, if we have to cut, then it would go down. We don't see it having a change on that. Again, what this is nothing more than an opportunity for us to get a revenue source that, putting all the cards on the table, is 85% funded by out-of-town people.
And essentially I agree with that. I'm just concerned about the transparency of the whole thing and whether, if the funds are not in fact going to enhance the highway department is not going to be increased by $300,000 a year. They're going to remain the same. So for those people who might be wondering why more roads aren't being surfaced, considering this large influx of money, that's going to be a question that people are going to have to answer.
And I think we've been transparent in Ms. Craver's letter, the note that she read tonight about it, and I think we're being transparent about it as we're sitting up here talking about it.
Mr. McGrath?
The other thing, Kathleen, is that line item still has to be approved at town meeting, okay? And so so in other words, when you look at your funding sources on your budget worksheet, you're going to see, if this passes, you'll see a line item of what came in under the additional 3-cent gas tax, and then where the money, where the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee would like to spend the money. If the townspeople at that time deem that they would rather put that money, if we don't put it into the road budget, and the townspeople at that time say, look, we want to put the money into the road budget so we can upgrade the roads, this and that, that we can change it at town meeting.
Right, I hear what you're saying. I guess my concern is that the gas tax is specifically for roads and bridges, and that's not necessarily where it's going. So thank you for explaining that.
I think you're next, ma'am.
Fran Lower, 88 Masonic Road. My husband and I were discussing this the other night. Right now, we don't buy gas at those stations because their prices are so much higher. And I kind of think that the people who are using cars here in Charlton probably aren't buying gas here anyhow. But those who are more or less forced to buy it are going to be suddenly forced to either go elsewhere to get a lower price, or maybe these two gas stations on Route 20 might go out of business because they've got no business. I mean, the people coming down Route 20 who get off the Pike at Sturbridge are going to find a cheaper gas station before they get here. And the same thing comes from Auburn direction. They're going to find cheaper gas. I don't see that it's going to be a big windfall, and it's probably going to be harmful to the two gas stations out on Route 20. I mean, if we could just do it and take it off of the one on the Mass Pike and the Charlton Rest area, that would be great, but I'm sure that wouldn't be legal. So.
Do you have something, Mr. Zakarovich?
Yeah, just to address that, if we lost all of the gas on Route 20, we'd still come with over $300,000 from passing from just the Mass Pike itself. And people are already paying the higher cost in Charlton, and it would be a 3-cent increase from the current price as of now.
Mr. Swenson?
Mr. Moderator, if I may, just to counter that, as a resident, I buy gas when I need it, which is most often while I'm in Charlton. I do buy gas at those stations, or particularly the Gulf station, because number one, I believe in supporting a local business, and the convenience of it, and 3 cents to me personally isn't going to make me go look other places for my gas. Take my time and burn gas to go to save a penny or two. For some people it would make sense. I have to drive through Southbridge on my way to or from work. I'll make a point of stopping there. We understand that may be making it a factor. As we were going through the gas price fluctuations that we went through the past few years, it was surprising that the amount of gas pumped in the Charlton stations remained pretty consistent. As gas was going up around $4 and is now down closer to $2. Their volume didn't fluctuate. Their volume fluctuated very little.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joe Spiewak, Osgood Road. I rise in support of this article. I have 2 questions. One, would we consider snow removal as part of maintenance? So the question is simply, can we use some of this funding for snow removal?
We believe it would qualify.
Thank you. And the second question would be, do we currently know what the general fund obligation is to the highway department excluding salaries?
That I'll refer to Ms. Graber on that.
And maybe more concisely, is it greater or less than $420,000 a year? That's great.
Excluding highway salaries, you have expenses and equipment at $89,000. Uniform allowance, $4,500. Road machinery maintenance, $66,000. I'm just rounding up. Construction drainage, $19,600. Dam repairs, $2,400. Stormwater management, $5,000. Total department expense, $187,000. Total highway salaries and expenses, $808,000. So we would be able to also use that for the salaries, which they are maintaining the roads.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Dick Vaughn. I live on Lakeview Drive, and I'm also on the Board of Assessors. When we go through the expenses and the revenue in the town, we're always looking for opportunities to take advantage of situations. When we came up with this information from Lee, we need to understand the Massachusetts Turnpike goes right through the middle of Charlton. And there are 2 gas stations on that turnpike that are in Charlton. And the fact is that the bulk of this money, and it will be in excess of $400,000 as it stands today if it was passed. That's money that's coming 99% from people who do not live in Charlton. And those 2 gas stations that are in Charlton on the Route 20, most of those people who stop there, the bulk of them, are for people who are traveling through Charlton on Route 20 and don't live here. And so the bulk of that money is coming from out-of-town people. This is an opportunity to bring into this community in excess of $400,000. And it will not cost a dime to get it. And I think that's why the Board of Assessors was unanimous in going out and working and putting this together and recommending it to the board and to the townspeople. This is an opportunity to bring in excess of $400,000 to this community, which we desperately need.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I like it, I'm in favor of it, that you're making us some money. However, it needs to be pointed out that the board is being deceptive. Through the first note that is written, and by your own admission, Mr. Swenson, money will be taken from the budget, general fund budget that is already allocated to the highway department and backfilled, so to speak, with this source of revenue. If this money coming in is new money and it is for bridges and roads, then every nickel and dime should be put on top of the current highway budget for bridges and roads, in addition to their current budget, so that we can get more improvements, more paving, et cetera, and all the things that we need. To do anything else would be deceptive by playing a shell game with money on accounting, for instance.
I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. The money will be used, as it said it will be used for. That will allow us to use other general funds for other purposes to maintain the town. If we want to be blunt and put all the cards on the table, a few years ago we attempted an override in this town. And people said, we don't want an override. We get people up here demanding that we improve our services, that we have better fire control, that we have more policemen, that we have better roads, that we have all these services. We're not going to give you the money to do it, but make sure you get it done. Here is a chance for us to bring, as Mr. Vaughn said, approximately $400,000, and the 2 words I'll add to that, per year into the town to help provide the services that the people of this town are demanding. Now, if you want to consider playing a shell game, you certainly have the right to do that. I think we're being transparent in saying it's an opportunity for us to fund the highway department and the work of the highway department from another source, and allowing us to take that money and fulfill some of the other needs of the town.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, sir.
To add an analogy to that, let's say you had $100 and you personally budgeted $20 for lunch, and someone gives you $20 for lunch. Would you then feel obligated to spend $40 on lunch? It's kind of the same kind of principle there.
Okay, I can concede that point, but it seems like you're moving things around. Then I'll have one question more. Do we feel that the highway budget is adequate now to improve and take care of our roads in a satisfactory manner?
No. No department and budget in this town right now is satisfactory to meet the needs of the services they're expected to provide.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Sounds good so far. It takes a lot to get me to say that. I guess my next question would be, say it's election day, or we approve it today, it goes to the election day, it passes on election day. How much control do you have over it from here on out? Can you change the rate of the taxation at any time? Can you lower it? Would you have to send another petition to the State House in order to even make a remote change? How much control does the town actually have in this at the end of the day?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The special legislation will enable us to impose the tax. Town meeting decides what that amount is.
Okay.
We went, and I'll be honest, we went with the 3 cents per gallon because that's what the town of Lee did, and it all worked. And again, as Ms. Craven stated earlier, this is kind of a new, somewhat uncharted territory for the state, allowing municipalities to do this. So our thought process was, the town of Lee did it, and it worked. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's take what they did and see if we can implement that in the town of Charlotte.
Mr. Cooper? Can you talk right in the microphone for everybody, please?
Just for your information, it's already been opposed for other towns for 3 cents. If we were to change that, it would not pass the legislation. So I think that saying that, well, why don't we double that, we could get 800,000, which the town could use. It wouldn't pass the legislation. So I think we're pretty well stuck at the 3. And I think that we would have a good chance of it going through.
Well, no, I mean, I do understand that. I guess my question is, say you wanted to make any changes to it, would you only be able to make changes to it every annual town meeting? Would you have to wait until the end of the year? Because I agree, I don't think anything higher than 3 would pass, but you never know, someone may want to raise it to 4 cents, and somewhere along the line down the road, how would they go about doing that? Or if they wanted to lower it to 2?
Legislation would have to be changed again.
Okay. So
Can't be changed. You can't just say, next week we're gonna do this. The legislation says 3 cents, that's what it has to be. You would have to go through this whole process again on any changes. It would have to be voted by town meeting, election, the whole process.
Okay, so it would just be repeat each time. Thank you.
Mr. Swenson, did you have something?
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Cooper addressed the questions from moderator.
Thank you. Mr. Sage?
When this warrant was first printed and out there without the motions, because those came later, it says specifically, such receipts will be reserved for the repair and maintenance of the town's roads. And now you're saying it's actually going to be used to fund the budget that the highway department needs, and they'll determine whether they use that for uniforms, equipment they might need, and so it's not necessarily going to repair bridges and repair roads.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Zafirovich?
To add a point, at the beginning of this debate, the town administrator added that one thing we can do with this extra money is restore an account that we previously lowered, the road maintenance account.
From 42,800
to 75,000. So this will give us at least the ability, at least the room to actually restore that account. Therefore, roads would actually be repaired in the future, or have a more likely chance to be.
I'd rather see it restored to 170,000.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Swenson.
If I may, to address Mr. Stage's point, the highway department today doesn't have the authority to say, well, we have some money, we'll go buy a new truck, or we'll spend more on uniforms. Every penny that the highway department and other departments spend in this town is a line item on the annual budget that is voted by town meeting, so they don't have that discretion.
So can you put this money that comes in into stabilization?
No, this money would go to fund the highway department's budget. But again, that budget is set by town meeting. It's not set by them. They can't say, well, we got an extra $13,000, we're gonna go buy a new snowplow.
Okay.
They don't have that authority.
So at town meeting, we can open up the budget and say, we don't like the fact that the highway department's budget has gone up or down, depending upon what happens in the future here. And we can say, well, we had these 300, 400 something $1,000. We'd like more money coming out of stabilization, because that's where we steal the money first place to finance everything that the town has. And we want to put another 50,000 into reconstruct, repair, and paving roads. We can do that at town meeting in May?
There's no reason that that couldn't be done.
Be guaranteed that if you level out the funding to the highway department and only bring it up to 75,000, and we're bringing in $300,000, $400,000, I will open the budget.
If I may, my thought process would be, if you have concerns along those lines, that when we start budget season, which has already started, that we start addressing those concerns now. Because again, please keep in mind the thought process in doing this. Our schools are horribly underfunded. Our public safety, fire, police, library are horribly underfunded. Here's a chance to get a funding source for the highway that will hopefully allow us to address some of those other deficiencies.
Chief?
You know, the turnpike came through the center, through Charlton, and split Charlton in half many years ago. Public safety has been affected directly by the turnpike being in our community. I teach a class in traffic incident management, and we talk about what our biggest gripes is about traffic. My biggest gripe is that the turnpike goes through Charlton. I wish it went through Worcester. But this is our opportunity to reap the benefits from the turnpike. The amount of traffic, we get 10 million vehicles that travel from Auburn to Sturbridge every single year. 1 million of those people stop at the turnpike plazas, one way or the other, to spend money in our community. Why we are not looking at taking some of this money, that people are from out of town, they're not people from our community. We're affected every single time when we go up there for the turnpike for a motor vehicle crash. And when we're up there for a motor vehicle crash, lots of times we're up there for several hours. We have to backfill the station, we have to get people back in the station to try to cover the rest of our ambulance calls that we do, and to make sure that the community is protected. The turnpike, we were able to charge for some of that time that we're up there with apparatus fees, but the turnpike is affecting our community, not only with public safety, but also noise. We hear noise pollution all the time from the turnpike. This is our opportunity to gain some of that wealth back into our regular budget and to make things work for us. Splitting hairs of where it goes, and you know, the general fund is where the general fund is. You know, splitting hairs when it comes to if it's $40 here or $20 there, whatever. The big fact is that when we go up there, we're affected. We're up there for many, many hours. This is our opportunity to make it, a name for the Charlton and be able to get some money. The reason that the town of Lee did this is because the turnpike goes through Lee, and the turnpike has a rest area in Lee. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and, you know, when I first heard this article, I said, oh, great. You know, if it's $400,000 coming to the town, call it a shell game, call it what you have to. We need it in the general fund. I don't see where the highway department needs $400,000 extra per year. If it's, call it what it is, it's money to the town. As it says in Article D, any disbursement from the public maintenance fund shall be by a majority vote of the quorum of the Board of Selectmen. I think that's where it should be done. Put it in a general fund if we have to. If it has to be designated to the highway department, take it off, put it in the general fund. Whatever has to be done, let's do it. We need the money.
Yeah. Seeing no further people for discussion, we'll move to a vote. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented in Article 9, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no. The motion passes by majority vote. Article 10, zoning map amendment, village district boundary expansion. To see if the town will vote to revise the Charlton zoning bylaw as follows. To see if the town will amend the Charlton zoning map by extending the boundaries of the village district by rezoning the following properties from the current agricultural A district designation and or low-density residential R40 district designation to village district zoning designation as listed.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Zaharovich.
I move that Article 10 be accepted as printed.
We have a motion and second to accept Article 10 as printed. Do we have a recommendation from the planning board? Yes, sir.
Chairman of the planning board, Peter Stout.
Right into the microphone, please.
The planning board approves this motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on Article 10? Or do you have a reporter?
At our September 16th planning board meeting, the planning board held public hearings on the planning board's approval to extend the boundaries of the village district in the center of town. Upon closing the hearing, the board voted to recommend to town meeting approval of the village district boundaries expansions. The expansion is a recommendation from our recent Charlton Village Study Planning Study. Some property owners just outside of the current boundary district participate in our studies, workshops, and meetings and express their interest in being included in the village district. The additional property to be added to the village district includes the Overlook Mansion, Masonic Home, St. Joseph's Church, the Bond property next to the church, the Miller family property, and the Child Art and Activity Center at 4 Crescent Hill Road. The zoning revision would add the ability to further development at these sites to include mixed-use village-style shops, offices, and residential in a designed area compatible to the characteristics of the existing village center in town. Any proposed new village district resulting in the future use will require to apply to the planning board for a site plan review public hearing. In addition, the EDC reviewed the proposal and recommended support and approval.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on Article 10? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got a question. When you change a district from, say, R40 to residential, to historic, don't you have to send a notification out to the property owners? I mean, you just mentioned property that abuts mine. I knew nothing about this.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Historic district changes are not part of Chapter 48 zoning, and I don't know anything about it. Maybe they do. But for zoning districts in Massachusetts, no. State zoning law requires that we notify by putting 2 legal ads in the paper and posting it with the clerk and with the planning board office itself. But I've never seen any community that sent notices to anybody for the zone change itself and its zoning map.
Because when you change district to historic district, there's some serious restrictions that go on a property.
This isn't a historic district change. This is a standard zoning map change. Historic districts may be different. You may be correct, but it's not part of the zoning map. What you're describing is not a zone change.
So what are we changing this to? You listed St. Joseph Church. I live next door to it.
Through the moderator.
Mr. McGrath?
I'm sorry.
No, what it is they're changing it to a village district where they can do mixed use as there is already a village district up in the center of town. The best way to explain it is, remember how the people had the florist business up in the center of town and then they lived up over the florist business? This is the same exact thing. What's happened is that when we originally did the study with the planning board, and it came before town meeting, everybody voted, that they like we'll try this size zoning district. Over the past few years, we've expanded the district, and Alan, you can correct me, or Peter if I'm wrong. We expanded it north-south towards Flint Road to encompass a couple of properties down there I believe the LeBlanc family bought the properties. Now what's happened is other people have asked that they've seen, what can take place, or what the interest that some people have had in it. So they're extending this down Masonic Home Road to encompass the Masonic Home property, and I think a few other pieces of passes on the same side of the street as the police station. And then on North Main Street, up going up towards CBS, Alan. How far up there?
We're up by the Miller family.
Okay. And are any of the parcels on
H. Putnam extension?
Is there any parcels on H. Putnam that are changing?
No, Mr. McGrath, only the parcels that the chairman, Peter Stock, has read.
Because I've already had to change it. I had it already changed from R40 to community business with Lowe's who's coming in. I mean, I don't know how many more times I'm going to change it.
Yes, you're not being changed.
I'm going to turn it into a garage pretty soon.
Is there further discussion on Article 10? Yes, sir.
Is in addition to now allowing mixed-use buildings in this newly rezoned village, are there any other type of buildings that would be allowed or disallowed when changing from type A and R40 into a village district?
Yes, that's a very good question. As we've answered that before, that's been asked before, the R40 and the agricultural districts only allow, mainly as your primary use, large lot single-family homes. what a village district does in the Massachusetts zoning, it still allows that. But it adds in what's called smart growth mixed use. It allows you to have on a piece of property mixed village-style shops, offices, apartments and condos mixed in. So I'll give you a hypothetical. The Miller property, for instance, is about 75 acres. Right now, all they could do is a large lot, single-family home subdivision, or Chapter 40B affordable housing. What they could do with the village district is design it to buffer with the neighbors, cluster more, preserve some open space, and combine it with some shops, some offices, and or some apartments or condos. It doesn't have to be all three of those, but you can mix and match possibly. And the idea is to maintain the style of a traditional, historic, high-density, mixed, small lot village district with new development that's architecturally designed to fit the character of it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussions on Article 10? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. As a zoning change, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of accepting Article 10 as printed, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no? No. The motion on Article 10 passes by more than 2/3 vote. Article 11, zoning bylaw revision, vehicle garage structure in AG. To see if the town will vote to revise the Charlton zoning bylaw as follows. To see if the town will amend the Charlton zoning bylaw by adding to section 200-5 special regulations, a new subsection 200-5.19, commercial motor vehicle garage structure on residential property as follows, as listed in your handout. Mrs. Cooper.
I move that Article 11 be accepted as printed.
Second.
We have a motion and second to accept Article 11 as printed. What is the report of the planning board?
The planning board approves this motion.
Your report?
Yes. At the September 16th planning board meeting, the board held a public hearing on the planning board's petition to allow the construction of a commercial vehicle garage on a driver's owned residential property in agricultural zone. Upon closing the hearing, the board voted to recommend to the town meeting approval of the zoning bylaw revision request. This revision was requested earlier this year by Mr. Mike Peters, who lives on Stafford Street. Mr. Peter owns a large commercial truck for which the zoning bylaw currently does not allow him to build such a commercial vehicle storage garage on his residential property. The zoning bylaw revision would allow such a garage to be built, subject to the planning board's site plan review prior to issuing of a building permit.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on Article 11? Yes, sir.
The term commercial motor vehicle is pretty broad. It could encompass a big rig, or it could encompass a plumber or carpenter or electrician's E-150 work van. And if this was to pass, and say a plumber or electrician had one or two commercial plate vans, it seems like you wouldn't be allowed to do that anymore. Is that accurate?
Mr. Gordon.
Actually, no, if I can qualify. We worked with the initial petitioner and his attorney, Henry Lane, who's a land use attorney in Massachusetts, and we discussed that at planning board. The key here is the fact that it's the structure itself. Right now, the zoning bylaw does not allow, in the agricultural zone, a person who owns a house to put in a garage for a large commercial vehicle. It limits it to only one of them. And if you have a commercial vehicle right now that you can fit in a standard garage, no one is going to cause a problem with that. We have a Section 2 definition of garage, and it mentions that a garage is for the purpose of housing a vehicle for the purpose of the residence. But it's the big rigs. No one is going to say to somebody, you have a standard size vehicle that you can't get in. The examples of when it will come forward are similar to Mr. Peters. I have a vehicle and I want a building permit for a non-standard size garage, and the bylaw doesn't allow me to do anything beyond the normal size of a proportional garage to a normal house. So the only hypotheticals we're going to see is there. If someone owns a pickup truck for their business, if they own a standard technical van that they want to put in a regular sized garage, it won't even trigger an issue there. This is about when someone comes in for something very outsized, that your routine garage is getting to the size of, you're either exceeding the average garage size or you're getting to look like a small house. And that's what this is really all about. I think Mr. Peters came up with a good idea that it's for very large parcels. He suggested the 8-acre minimum because in his situation, it allows a lot of distance between neighbors and a large, big rig garage, which is what he needs. So I think that's a very good question, but it really won't trigger that type of concern happening day to day with the building commissioner or the planning board.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on Article 11? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. Sorry? Yes, sir.
Yes. Again, I appreciate the work that's been put into this between Alan and Peter, but I guess my question probably should be directed to town council, is if the bylaw doesn't specifically say what a size should be relative to square footage, then how long is a piece of string? In our bylaw, as far as I know, there's not specific to where it says the garage accessory building cannot be any larger than the home. Because I think this is the standard that's being used right now. So if you have a 2,000 square foot home, you can only have a 2,000 square foot garage. Because I'm a little confused as far as what's the rule.
Who would like to address that? Mr. Cosby, would you like to address that?
Well, it's been a long time since I've been asked any question about the child zoning bylaw, and the town planner has really handled that, so if you don't mind, I'll let him answer. Okay.
I'd like to give Mr. Meskis first and then comment.
Mr. Meskis.
Hi, Kurt Meskis, H-Foot Road, Building Commissioner, Zoning Enforcement Officer. The problem we're running into is the zoning bylaw is specific about accessory structures on a residential lot. And it says an accessory structure will be subordinate to the primary structure. My understanding of the word subordinate by looking in the dictionary is less than. So in this case, there was a gentleman that came forward with a 2,000 square foot house, wanted to put up an 8,000 square foot garage, and reading those words, I had to deny it. Another proposal came forward similar to that, and what we've seen in Charlton is people have some large lots and have lots of toys, and they want larger buildings, and I'm just trying to work through the system and balance the fact that the zoning bylaw does say an accessory structure will be subordinate to the principal structure.
In my research of subordinate, there was nothing in there that said less than. Not that I want an argument with Kurt, but so what we're saying here is this article boils down to that definition that the accessory building is subordinate, or an accessory building is subordinate, and the definition of subordinate is less than.
That makes sense to me through the moderator.
That makes sense to you? You feel comfortable defending that?
No, I haven't reviewed the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
The rationale makes sense to me, and again, the town
Thank you
planner is
very
far
much.
more familiar with your current zoning bylaw than I am.
Okay. But for instance, is Mr. Moderator, forwarded to town council, is that if someone wanted to build a 20,000 square foot house and they had enough land, they could certainly do that, couldn't they?
Provided it complies with the requirements of the zoning bylaw,
Right.
and actually use-wise, yeah.
Right, and so that homeowner could then go and build an 18,000 square foot garage. Because it's less than, right? I know it's excessive, but I mean, if Tom Brady came to town, I mean, his house is 15,000 square feet or whatever it is, his garage would be at least 10, 12,000 square feet.
Maybe you should be more worried about Jay Leno or Jerry Seinfeld.
Their garages are much, much bigger than their homes. Correct. And the thing is I know it sounds unusual, but I mean, is because it's all about language and whether or not that language exists or doesn't exist in a bylaw.
Well, and again, that would take a review of the entire bylaw to figure out.
Again, it's late, I don't want to keep going. Thank you
But
very
I
much.
think the answer of accessory reminds me of the question of the It's an economist question compared to what? You know, the economist was walking down the street one day and someone said, "How's your wife?" And he said, "Compared to what?" If it's accessory, it has to be less than the maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Is there further discussion? Yes, Chief.
The way I read it says here, it says commercial motor vehicle, and I agree with this gentleman here about commercial motor vehicle. I don't know if there's any place in the planning board where it states the definition of a commercial motor vehicle.
No, it doesn't, because again, the focus here is on a garage structure and commercial motor vehicle. When we discussed it again with Attorney Lane, who has a lot of land use consulting experience, if you get into starting to defining your commercial vehicles, you could conflict with various state laws on vehicles. The key is just to go by your garage definition in section 2 and use the phrase commercial and use the logic of who comes forward for large vehicles that can't fit in a routine garage, which is very rare and would be under this circumstance and would go through site plan review.
Mr. McGrath.
Through the moderator, I think, Chief, that would be probably covered by the way of registering motor vehicles. It would revert back to state law. Okay? I don't believe anybody that has an over-the-road, let's say somebody's using an OAP plate on a loader or an OAP plate on a Euclid or something like that, they wouldn't fall under commercial vehicle.
I just have the concern about when we do have, like you say, regular size pickup trucks, regular size vehicles, and those kind of things. I get that, and it fits in a regular size garage. I get all that, but are we talking about maybe a 10-wheeler that you can easily have a garage for that's subordinate to the original structure, and it could be commercial?
Again, it's only going to come up when someone who owns a commercial vehicle is trying to create a garage that exceeds what Mr. Meskis described as subordinate to. In the case that triggered this, the gentleman wants to build a garage for his large commercial truck that exceeds the size of his house, and he can't do it. This would trigger site plan review to do it. So no one is going to go around saying this vehicle and that vehicle, we don't want them in your standard garage. It's about when a person goes to get a building permit and is denied because the garage exceeds the primary structure's size. So the hypothetical that is being expressed just will not happen. It's all about structure and size and building permit application.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So what you're saying is if I have a motorhome in town, I have 2 acres of land, I can't put up a building that you can drive it in, even if I call it a barn and put it in, just because of interpretation of one word. And you're trying to change it around, but you are saying commercial vehicles. Motorhome is not a commercial vehicle. And if I want to put up a barn on my property in town, there shouldn't be any reason not to be able to. And whether you say it's good for a commercial vehicle, for a camper, or anything else, it makes no sense that one word definition wouldn't let you put a barn up on your property. I don't care if you have 2 acres or 30 acres. So it just seems like this is an asinine proposal because it just makes no sense. And you're wording commercial. That's being discriminatory against a particular item. And you're saying it's not because of that, but that's exactly what you're saying in the proposal. So
we get into legal definitions between a garage and a barn in that type of scenario, and I'd have to defer, I'm not passing the buck, but I have to defer to the fact that in any Massachusetts town or city under state zoning law, the zoning enforcement officer, which in this case is Mr. Meskis, because the building commissioner is always the zoning enforcement officer in this state, would have to look at what the barn is being proposed for. If the barn was being proposed for garaging a commercial vehicle and exceeded the size of the house, then there's a problem with using it for that manner. Otherwise, there wouldn't be. So I kind of have to defer back to him in the case by case. but we are trying to respond to a citizen in town who has a legitimate denial problem, unfortunately, and finding a way in the bylaw to have it properly planned and allow it.
Is there further discussion on Article 11? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. Again, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of accepting Article 11 as printed, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no? No. I think I'd like to take a counted vote for that if I could. All those in favor of accepting Article 11 as printed, please raise your cards you received as you walked in. I count 14 in the section on my right and the stage. 5 on the section on my left. 16. And 16 in the center. All those opposed to accepting Article 11, please raise your cards. I count 5 in the section on my right and the stage. 8 on the section on my left. 5. And 5 in the center. Because the vote will change the outcome, the moderator is voting for this. The outcome is 36 in favor to 18 opposed, and it passes by the necessary 2/3 majority. Yes, ma'am? Yes, Ms. Graber?
Mr. Moderator, before you go on to the next article, Representative Peter Duran has come to the meeting and has given us some information regarding the gas tax. We were under the impression that it had already passed through the legislation. It is still in that process. So I feel it is important to let the council meeting people know that it is still in process. If you want to reconsider, my recommendation would be not to do that, because I do believe that all the things that people have said are still true, but you do need to know in full disclosure that it has not been completely accepted through the legislation. What that also would mean is that there would be 2 towns asking for this at this time, which I think may help the bills move forward. So I just, full disclosure, want to make sure that the town meeting is aware of that.
Thank you, Ms. Graber. We will now move on to Article 12.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure your math works on that.
Okay. Where do you think? What's the concern?
I don't think you get to 2/3 with 36 to 18.
Well, we'll double check our math. Yes. The total number of votes is 54, and 36 is 2/3 of 54. Right, two-thirds of the votes are in favor.
Mr. Moderator, I believe the question is in the language of the bylaws regarding two-thirds. Is it
More than two-thirds vote.
It's greater than or equal to two-thirds. Thank you. Moving on to Article 12 petition. To see if the town of Charlton will amend its property zoning by rezoning a parcel of land depicted as parcel B15, shown on Town of Charlton Tax Map 27, from its current zoning designation of BEP, Business Enterprise Park, to IG, Industrial General.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. McGrath?
I move that Article 12 be accepted as printed.
Second.
We have a motion and second to accept Article 12 as printed. What is the report of the planning board, please?
I'd like to make a correction on Article 12. A motion that the article be approved as printed with the modification of changing the reference from the Charlton Tax Map 27 of the Town Zoning Map, Assessor Map 27, Block B, Parcel 15. This is a typo correction from the previous.
Okay, well, if there's no objection to the restating of the motion here, can you just, do you have that in writing?
Yes.
If we could just get that in writing of what exactly the motion is that we'll be voting on, then you can proceed with your report.
At the October 7th planning board meeting, the planning board held a public hearing on the petition of Mr. Ralph Nichols and others to amend the zoning map to rezone the future Griffin Road Trust Business Park site from BEP to IG. Upon closing the public hearing, the board voted to recommend to the town approval of the zoning map revision request. Mr. Nichols received planning board subdivision special permits / sites plans approval a few years ago to build a business park on the property on the north side of the intersection of Route 20 and Route 169. At this time, he would like to be in his park first. At this time, he would like to be his first park tenant, relocation next building season to his existing distribution truck business at his present location on 169 to a new park site. The rezoning of IG designation is required to allow his business to move into the new site. Mr. Nichols and Bird Engineering will reapply to the planning board this winter to make some slight design adjustments to his roadway and lot design layout to accommodate the new business. The planning board found that the potential IG land use for the property is compatible to the already existing IG zone land using abutting the site. In addition, the board notified that the EDC has received the proposal and recommends support the approval.
Thank you. I'm just going to restate the motion to make sure everybody has heard it. The motion is that the article be approved as printed with the modification of changing the reference from Charlton Tax Map 27 to Town Zoning Map Assessors Map 27, Block B, Parcel 15. Is there any further discussion on Article 12? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no. Motion Article 12 passes unanimously. Article 13 petition, to see if the town of Charlton will amend its property zoning by rezoning a parcel of land depicted as parcel A3, shown on Town of Charlton Tax Map 37, and its rear portion of a parcel A2 as shown on Town of Charlton Tax Map 37, from its current zoning designation of BEP, Business Enterprise Park, to A, Agricultural. And do you have a substitute motion for this as well?
Yes.
Would you care to just present that?
Yep. I move that the article be approved as printed with the modifications to change the reference Charlton Tax Map 37 to Charlton Zoning Map Assessors 37, Block A, Parcel 2 and 3. This is a typo correction from the previous sponsor's petition.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second as presented, and I'll review that in a minute, but if you would be so kind as to give the planning board report on this, please.
At the planning board's October 7th planning board meeting, the board held a public hearing on the petition of Roy Gunther Jr. and Alex Santos to rezone 28 acres of land owned by them on the northeast corner of the intersection of Route 20 and Carroll Hill Road from BEP zoning map to agricultural zone. Upon closing the public hearing, voted to recommend to the planning board approval of the zoning map revision request. The board agreed with the two property owners that the southern portion of the two properties, which directly abut Route 20, are undevelopable due to situations among our existing wetlands. The rezoning will allow them to create a limited number of house lots on the northernmost portion of the property with direct driveway access off of Carroll Hill Road. The planning board finds that this use of the property is more compatible with nearby existing Carroll Hill residents. The board noted that the EDC reviewed the proposal and recommended support of approval.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on Article 13? Yes, sir.
Just one question to the planning board through you, Mr. Moderator. Does an agricultural designation allow anything besides houses that somebody might get upset about?
The agricultural zoning district, the primary use is large lot residential. It then allows a few accessory uses like garages and such, but the answer is no.
Is there any further discussion on Article 13? Seeing none, I'll read the motion again. The motion is that the article be approved as printed with the modification of changing the reference from Charlton Tax Map 37 to Town Zoning Map Assessors Map 37, Block A, Parcels 2 and 3. Although, again, this requires a 2/3 vote due to changing zoning. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed by no. The motion on Article 13 passes by greater than 2/3 majority. Mr. Neskis.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by rising. Thank you. Stand adjourned. Thank you.